Writing a book is possibly a painful journey, and sometimes not being able to sleep is a boon, and that's what saved me the last 2 years. I would start my writing at 3 o'clock in the morning. I never wrote really for a publisher. I just wrote it because I thought it's a story to be told. India needs a lens of an Indian, seeing it from the Indic wisdom that we all have. It's time that India's voice is heard in a truly forceful way, and the force of the pen is still mightier than the sword. What you deeply desire and what you deeply think about all the time, your destiny becomes that. Namaste, Revered Swami Ji, Manish Ji, all friends here. I see Deepak Ji has also come. All of you are today sort of a gift, not just an author, to just a human being, because the overwhelming affection and love that I've been receiving ever since this book has been launched. Obviously, there are some trolls also. That's part of the deal. But I think one overwhelms the other. And Ashwin was talking to me and said, you should talk about how you wrote the book. Writing a book is possibly a painful journey for anybody. Any author would know. Getting it published is the next part of the painfulness. And when you are writing about a personality who has got a 78% approval rating, possibly the highest any global leader today has got, and in a situation, the book is just coming out of a major electoral process that this country saw. I think when people say timing is everything, I was always worried. But this book had to come out. So the actual book took me 2 years. The research team, and I must, well, my name is the only thing that come on the front cover, but there's a huge set of people who worked with me. The extensive hours of research they spent. And it's always a joy to work with very young people, because for them, tiredness or timing both don't appear in their list. And when they're committed to something as deep as what they were doing, I think they really represented the seva and the tyaga that I write about in this book too. Some wonderful young people who worked hard, and I drove them a little crazy. So long hours, long meetings, plus a long day that you would normally have at the office. So it was fun. And sometimes not being able to sleep is a boon, and that's what saved me the last 2 years. I would start my writing at 3 o'clock in the morning many times, go on till 8:30. And then Manish was asking me, how many times you rewrote this book? I stopped counting after 30 or 32 attempts. I just thought, there's no point even keeping track. Why would you rewrite something? It's again because you write not to please anybody. You don't write to please an audience. You don't really write keeping a reader in mind, because a lot of publishers, when you submit the book proposal to them, will want you to say how will the book sell, and what does the book contain, and who's the audience, and does it really tickle an audience, and all that. But I never wrote really for a publisher. I just wrote it because I thought it's a story to be told. The last close to 20 years, a lot of my dilemmas in life has revolved around the person or the person's expression of leadership. Even though we work in the space of social development, what I saw was very troubling. And what was more troubling to me was the state itself was an instrument of violence. And when the state, which is supposed to be the custodian of its citizens, in its own wisdom is actually causing the trouble, then whom do you turn to? And so that took me on a path of confrontational activism, took me to my battles, took me to the courts, the human rights commissions, the different commissions that the country has set up under the constitution. And that was one part of my life and journey. And I realized that it can get your name in the newspaper. The drama can run for some time, but it wouldn't sort of solve a problem in perpetuity. And sometimes when the state is the cause of the problem, it doesn't want to solve the problem, because then it's conceding it is the problem. So I was struggling to appreciate how do we really solve it. So Rittel and Weber, two great social scientists that I read a lot about, describe these as wicked problems. I do mention it in my book too. They don't have straightforward solutions. They're so complex that you can't really press a button and say next day it will get solved. But our electoral cycles are 5-year cycles. The expectation of a voter is you will actually solve the problem. Your manifesto will be implemented, everything will be taken care of, and then the world is going to be a better place. And we live in a political economy where the doles are more attractive than the actual hard work that the country has to do. So it's a very difficult challenge. And how do you really look at leadership from all this? And what inspired me was the leadership I learned, saw, and experienced every day, not from some extraordinary person outside, not from a corporate CEO, but from what we ordinarily dismiss of as ordinary people, whom we call ignorant people, whom we call the poor, generally bracket them with all the other adjectives that this nation has discovered. From traditional chieftains, who are by virtue of the expression of leadership are chieftains. And I would like to start off talking about one person who influenced a lot of my thinking in my early days of working in indigenous populations in Karnataka, in Mysuru specifically. Kempaya was a Kadukurba chieftain, and he used to be a wonderful human being. One day he came to me he used to always be laughing, fun-filled, with pan beetle juice leaking from one side of his mouth, and just not worried about whether he's spurting it on my face or not, but he would just have the conversation. And such a cheerful person was looking very discouraged, very deeply depressed. And I'd never seen him like that. So I started conversing with him. I said, "Enaitu." He said, "You started this struggle for getting land for us. And the government is coming, you are coming, everybody is coming and telling us what is wrong, what is right, etc. And I find my people just making demands like nanig mane beku, nanig 2 ekre jameen beku. Beku is what I'm hearing. So I'm worried whether you're actually taking us all in the right direction." I asked him, what does he mean? He said, "ಸಾಂಪ್ರದಾಯಿಕವಾಗಿ ಯಜಮಾನಿಕೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೊಡೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ ನನಗೆ, ಕೇಳೋದೇ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ನೀವು ಮತ್ತು ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕೇಳೋದು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಲ್ಲ ನಮಗೆ ಅಂತ." And that really changed my approach, not just to human development, but it changed my approach to the government, it changed my approach to myself and what I believed in, and more importantly, it set me on the journey of discovering leadership. I said, if Kempaya, whose only understanding of leadership is because he inherited it, it was his legacy because his father was a chieftain of what we call the Jamma in those areas, could think so deeply and was so disturbed that the state was troubling him with its actions, and an NGO like mine was troubling him with my decisions, and had the wisdom, the humility and the courage and the emotive response of being depressed because he was actually feeling helpless, that he can't fight the system anymore. He said, "ನನಗೆ ಸಂಕಟ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು, ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬನೇ ಈ ಮಾತನ್ನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ನಾನು ಹಿಂದೆ ಇರಬೇಕಾಗಿದ್ದಂಥ ನನ್ನ ಜನ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೈ ಚಾಚ್ಕೊಂಡು ನನ್ನ ಮೇಲೆ ಎಗರ್ಕೊಂಡು ತೊಗೊತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅದನ್ನು." So in that 1 minute he expressed how leadership can be vulnerable, it can also be humbling, it can also be a sense of helplessness. And I never understood how to explain this. That started me on my journey of discovering the practice of leadership. And I started reading a lot, and my readings took me to mostly, when we all grow up with the kind of education, thankfully Sridharji is here after NEP, and if it's implemented in the seriousness that it was crafted, I think our country will see the change that we all desire. I was a product of Western thinking and Western education. Whether it is in India also, it is still Western. Swami Vivekananda says, you give a child a high school education. Though he said it more than 100 years ago, he said, give a child a high school education in India. The first thing he learns is to criticize his country. The second thing he says is, my parents are useless, they don't know anything. And the third thing he says is, India is a horrible country, I should leave. And not much has changed now. But it's changing. And that's the beauty of the last decade or so, where suddenly there's pride. Decolonization is not a slogan. It's a sense of discovering ourselves with the wisdom that this country has offered us. And so to me, when this journey of trying to put it all together started, and I went to the Kennedy School at Harvard to study and understand leadership, I did discover a lot. But one thing that it taught me was they can never give the answers to this country because they don't even understand the problem. They see it with a lens which is not appreciable, and we copy and imitate. But India needs a lens of an Indian, seeing it from the Indic wisdom that we all have. So cultural appropriateness and contextual relevance are as critical to leadership as anything else. And that's when I started crafting this thinking that the leader is irrelevant. It's not about having 100 followers behind, because the Western knowledge is you're a leader only when you can show your followers. But here, it's about when you only express leadership. Krishna could be a charioteer, could be a mentor, and could be a collaborator, because if there's no Arjuna, there's no collaboration for us to have the Gita at all. He could play many roles, and in that one act of being faithful to the role he was playing in the context that he was operating in, we have a great treatise like the Bhagavad Gita. And a country where three different acharyas, whether Ramanuja, Shankara or Madhva, have their own interpretations, commentaries, this country had the freedom to express yourself the way you wanted and what you believed in. So I thought, let me run the risk of expressing myself and my thoughts on leadership. I know I'll have my critics. I welcome that. I would like to learn from that. But I know also I'll have my admirers, because it's time that India's voice is heard in a truly forceful way, and the force of the pen is still mighty, mightier than the sword. So this journey started when I started discussing all this with whom I was privileged in my life to have two gurus. Managing one would be quite difficult, but I had the advantage of two, and the guru finds you. That's the way in Viveka Chudamani Shankara describes it. And Swami Achalanji, in his own way, found me. Unfortunately, I had his guidance only for 5 years. But then, the man was intelligent enough to see that I need a lot more guidance than just 5 years. And he had Swami Sureshanji possibly lend me his guidance and wisdom. And he was possibly the man who shaped me, my thinking, and what I am today. And I used to discuss with him a lot. And luckily, he laid down office quite early. And he was an expression of leadership in his own way. I write about him in my earlier book, Leadership Lessons. And talking to him, I asked him, there's so much I'm discovering. I don't know if they can put it into one book meaningfully. But what I'm more worried is not my ability to write about it, my ability to prove to the world that this can be a lived experience. It's nice to write a theoretical thesis, a PhD on leadership. But it's difficult to give something emulatable. No, we talk of Vivekananda, we talk of Aurobindo, we can talk of Gandhi or Ambedkar. And the easiest way for mankind not to worry about what the message they gave us was to put them on a pedestal, worship them and say Jayantis, and then do Namaskara, put a garland and move on with life. But when you want an emulatable model, when you want something that you want to live and make a difference in this world, which needs everybody to bring out the leader within us, I had to find somebody in flesh and blood who journeyed from a tea seller on a footpath on the platform of Indian Railways to where he is now, the struggles, the hard work. And this opportunity was seeded in my mind by Swami Sureshanji once. And he said, I don't know much, but he had come to the ashram. Looks like he's a genuine seeker. Why don't you try to study his life and see if we can make sense? But I didn't have the opportunity. Obviously, I was in hinterland of Mysore. So that didn't stop me from thinking, from dreaming. And fate has got a strange way of conspiring. I write about, even Nitin in his foreword in the book, Nitin Noria, the former Dean of Harvard Business School, writes about the very powerful statement that what you deeply desire and what you deeply think about all the time, your destiny becomes that. Very powerful Upanishadic statement. And I also, my epilogue, which is titled The Legacy of Dharma and the Dharma of Legacy, it starts off with that note. And maybe it was destined. It just worked out that 3 years ago I was appointed to the Capacity Building Commission, a commission directly under the Honourable PM, where it gave me a chance not just to report to him, but also to find time to discuss with him. And the beauty of the personality is he makes the time. I don't know how he crafts it, but he's never late for a meeting. So I had the privilege of watching him closely in action. It's very difficult not to get carried away by his charisma, like Sadhguru said. It's very difficult not to be an admirer. So the intellectual integrity is really valuable to me. It's priceless to me. I didn't really care what the world would talk about the book, but I really cared what I would talk about the book myself. And therefore, I had to be extremely cautious, and I've written everything that can be validatable. And the problem is not just, even again, my friends in the Indian knowledge systems world, a lot of them worked hard with me to validate what I was thinking. And the privilege of interpretation, like I explained, is a privilege. You can always interpret it one way, others would see it through a different lens. And my formal training coming from Harvard in leadership gave me the opportunity to interact with a lot of friends around the world who teach and discuss leadership. We all try to meet once a year at least. And that gave me the space to validate what I was thinking. And I realized that no one civilization or country can claim that it has cracked the code. Neither can India. Because we live in a world where we romanticize everything Indian and therefore lose the opportunity to explain it to the world. Or we don't even know enough about it and we say discard it completely. I think the answer is somewhere midway. Like Gandhi said, every door, window of our houses have to be open. Today's world is so interconnected that we will not be able to live with ourselves if we don't allow ideas to come from all sides. But we will not be able to definitely pardon ourselves if India's ideas are not sent to other homes around the world too. And that's what this book aspires to do. Well, I'm not saying something will not work, but I'm definitely saying Indic wisdom will work. A lot of knowledge that I gained of Western leadership is incomplete, inadequate. Though I quote 3 leaders in my last chapter who made momentous change for their countries and civilizations, whether it was Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, whatever his model, it worked for them in a particular context. He might not possibly succeed today. Whether it is Abraham Lincoln in a particular context, shifted the momentum of his country, brought in ideas which cost his life, but he still did it. And Deng Xiaoping in the context of China, who called, or I don't care what a cat is, whether a cat is black or white, but a cat is a cat. If it can catch a rat, that's all I'm interested in. And it looks a very simple, ordinary statement, but a very powerful paradigm that he deployed in his country. And they all operated in a particular context. They were adequate in that context. Today's world of wicked problems, the complexity we all are living in, we need a new kind of leadership which is collaborative, which is adaptive, which is selfless, which can give more than take, which can be equidistant, because the noise and distraction, all you got to do is watch Parliament, and then you'll appreciate all that is happening around our country. But still you have to perform. You got to go back to your office and not get distracted. I remember if somebody comes into my office with all the knowledge, I don't think, I would say if somebody would ask me the question, what percentage of the book you have written you actually live? I can only say I'm trying to live it 100%, but maybe I live it 20%. Because it's not easy to actually live it every day, to be that sense of ekatvam and samatvam that the Gita talks about, or the sita pragnati that we all have to exhibit. If somebody walks into my office and say, your report was trashy, I will be feeling very bad, upset, and it will linger on for a long time in my mind. But to introduce the Farm Bill with a deep conviction that agrarian economy in India will change. I've been privy to these conversations where a farmer's income will actually double, and look and celebrate that tomorrow we can change India's rural sector. And then to go back and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I didn't understand your pulse of what you want. And withdrawing that takes a lot of courage. It may be just a newspaper article or a headline for most of us, but changing a small decision you as a corporate CEO take, when the whole company believes that you're God and because you write the check finally. But then to say that I made a mistake and learn from it and then move on and not be affected by either of the two decisions. To have an enormous sense of humor, which is a real him, but have to project a role as a politician as what the world has to see. A different role. To separate role from self, to differentiate. That Krishna differentiates being a mentor from a charioteer. All of us have to separate roles. We all play several roles in life and we can't allow one to overlap over the other. To do all this continuously, all the time, without losing sight of a Vikasit Bharat. More than 60% of the world has had elections this year. We saw results recently coming out of one country. Just imagine, no leader in this world, while standing for election, we have another country which is going into election, we are not even sure if the leader knows he's standing for an election. And those are realities. All of us are really in that situation. And I'm not humiliating or making fun. I'm just presenting to you what is happening around the world today. Not a single leader in his wisdom has ever dreamt, has had the courage to dream and say, the next 25 years, this is my vision for my country. To be strategic enough to say, and he may not be there, he may not be a prime minister, but he believes that Amrit Kal is for this country, for every Indian. And he says we have to be proud that we'll take it there. To say that Team India will build this new India, to agree that I'll surrender this. I'll actually learn to let go of the asymmetries of information and power. That's what makes governments powerful. To say that partnership is the answer for this nation. And that public leadership is something which is remarkable. To talk about Antyodaya not as a slogan but as a conviction, and I write about it in the book. So keep his sight 50 years focus on just serving this nation and nothing else. The expression of that service might be different. So I would urge you all to judge the book by what is inside. To read it with a critical lens, it's fair. But if you believe in it, that book will only be a book that you've read and it will be of no use to anybody. If you truly believe in it, if this book has to leave an impact. And I'm thankful to the WMG Group who so sincerely believe in it. They said that you cannot just come, launch a book, give a speech and get away. We want everybody in the audience to carry it back and make me work 6 hours non-stop yesterday to sign each copy and say that people have to read it. And that is going to be our contribution to building this nation. So thank you, Rajesh, Srikar, and everybody in the entire WMG team. And I must, before closing, I must say, I had the privilege of meeting very senior people, very close confidants, long interactions. One book cannot capture everything I discovered. 50 years of research is not easy to put into one book. I hope I have the energy, the courage, and the necessity to write more. This book is expected to be as academic as it can, in a practitionerly useful way. There might be 20 PhDs hiding inside. As much as one very senior management expert called me and said, after reading the book, he said, please stop calling it a book. It's the finest do-it-yourself kit I've ever received in my life. So this is what the world needs. And I hope when you exercise the power within each of you, bring out the leader in you, bring out the act of leadership. And leadership, like Swami Vivekananda said, has to be alive and fulfilling. In his letter to the Mysore Maharaja, he wrote, he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. Let leadership make you all alive in the service of others. Thank you.